All right, so this PowerPoint presentation is going to cover everything you need to know about stimulants. So, stimulants are drugs that can keep an individual going both mentally and physically when the individual should be tired. So, this chapter is going to cover the restricted stimulants like cocaine and amphetamine. The readily available stimulants such as nicotine and caffeine are also discussed um, in later chapters or later PowerPoint presentations besides this one. Diving into a little bit on the history of cocaine, the origin of the earliest civilization in the Americas, which is the beginning around 5000 BC of what was to become the Inca Empire in Peru, has been traced to the use of coca. Natives of the Andes Mountains in Bolivia and Peru today still use coca as their ancestors did, chewing the leaves and holding a ball of cocoa leaf almost continually in the mouth. The psychoactive effects can be made stronger by adding some calcified lime, and this raises the pH level inside the mouth. This increases the extraction of cocaine and allows greater absorption into the blood supplying the inside of the mouth. The shrubs are grown in small 2 to 3 acre patches called cocals, some of which are known to have been under cultivation for over 800 years. Before the 16th century invasion by Pizarro, the Incas built a well developed civilization in Peru. The coca leaf was an important part of the culture, and although earlier use was primarily in religious ceremonies, coca was treated as money by the time the conquistadors arrived. So Angelo Mariani is a French chemist which imported tons of coca leaves and used an extract form of them in many products. One could suck on a cocoa lozenge, drink cocoa tea, or obtain the cocoa leaf extract in any of a large number of other products. It was Mariani's cocoa wine, though, and that's what made him rich and famous. So, cocaine was isolated before 1860, but there is still a debate over who did it first and exactly when. There is simple and inexpensive processing of 500 kilograms of cocoa leaves, which yields 1 kilogram of cocaine. An available supply of pure cocaine and the newly developed hypodermic syringe improved the drug delivery system. And in the 1880s, physicians began to experiment with it. In the United States, the second famous cocaine proponent, which is Dr. W.S. Halsted, who was later referred to as the father of modern surgery, experimented with the ability of cocaine to produce local anesthesia. The third famous to encourage cocaine was Sigmund Freud. He studied it for like the drug for its potential as a treatment medication for several conditions, including depression and morphine dependence. Freud spent a frightful night nursing his close friend through an episode of cocaine psychosis. After that experience, he generally opposed the use of drugs in the treatment of psychological problems. With so much going for cocaine and its availability in a large number of products for drinking, snorting, injection, it kind of seems strange that between 1887 and 1914, 46 states passed laws to regulate the use and distribution of cocaine. Many articles were written both in the popular press and medical journals. In these journals, uh, they exaggerated and fabricated stories about cocaine, intoxicated black men committing atrocities against white people, the racial rhetoric that the anti cocaine propaganda was a major contributor to the passage of the 1914 Harrison Act. The new law taxed and regulated the production, importation, and distribution of opium and cocoa products as a result of the developments. Cocaine use declined, but it never completely disappeared. So, looking at forms of cocaine, as a part of the process of making illicit cocaine, the cocoa leaves are mixed with an organic solvent such as kerosene or gasoline. After thorough soaking, mixing, and mashing, the excess liquid is filtered out to form a substance known as coca paste. In South America, This paste is often mixed with tobacco and smoked. The paste can be made into cocaine hydrochloride, which is a salt that mixes easily in water and is so stable that it cannot be heated to form vapors for inhalation. Cocaine hydrochloride cannot be smoked because extremely high temperatures are necessary for the hydrochloride portion to vaporize, and such high temperatures destroy most of the actual cocaine molecule. So, in order to produce smokable cocaine, the hydrochloride portion has to be removed. And this can be done by adding an organic solvent, such as like um, ether, such as ether. The resulting freed cocaine base can be heated and the vapors inhaled. This method is referred to as freebasing, but can be dangerous because the combination of fire and fumes is extremely explosive. Today, this form of freebasing is rarely used in large part because of the availability of crack. Crack, which is smokable cocaine, can be easily made by mixing powder cocaine with baking soda and water and then drying it. The onset of drug effects and therefore the intensity of it or of the effects varies depending on the route of administration. Drug effects are more intense following intravenous injection and inhalation compared with oral or intranasal administration. The effects produced by cocaine are qualitatively similar despite the route of administration. Simply put, powder and crack cocaine are the same drug. Some legal controls. There was little concern that was given to cocaine until the end of the 1960s when amphetamines became harder to obtain and cocaine use began to increase. As had occurred earlier, nearly a century before, the virtues of cocaine were again being touted. Some medical experts even argued that as strong a case could be made for legalizing it as legalizing marijuana. And throughout the 1970s and early into the 80s, cocaine was relatively expensive, and the use of the drug was associated with society's movers and shakers. It was viewed as a drug for the glamorous and the powerful. And by the mid to late 1980s, traffickers began selling crack. Because crack was sold for as little as $5 per dose, the cocaine experience became more widely available. But as might be expected, people got what they paid for, which is poor quality cocaine. At times, crack is so adulterated that it contains mostly cut and very little, if any, cocaine. So this development increased the racial and economic diversity for both the sellers and the users. In response to concerns about cocaine, President Ronald Reagan issued a proclamation designating October 1986 as Crack Cocaine Awareness Month. Congress passed the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. An individual convicted of selling 5 grams of crack cocaine would be required to serve a minimum sentence of 5 years in prison. Blacks accounted for an extraordinarily high percentage of those convicted under these laws as a result of concerns of racial discrimination. Congress directed the U.S. Sentencing Commission to study the issue. Mounting public pressure about racial discrimination in drug law enforcement contributed to Congress passing and President Obama signing the Fair Sentencing Act in 2010. This law reduced, but did not eliminate, the sentence disparity between crack and powder cocaine from a 100 to 1 to 18 to 1 ratio. Under the new law, the amount of crack required to trigger a 5-year sentence is at least 28 grams. In this chart here, you can see the racial characteristics of federal cocaine offenders, broken down by Black, Hispanic, white, and other races from 1992 up through 2006. And this one shows the same Black, Hispanic, white, and other races, but breaks it down from the year 2010 up through 2018 and gives you a breakdown of the different percentages that are imprisoned for crack or cocaine distribution. Cocaine's mechanism of action. Uh, Cocaine's a fairly complicated molecule, which doesn't resemble any of the known neurotransmitters in an obvious way. The structure of cocaine doesn't help at all in understanding how the drug works on the brain. Cocaine blocks the reuptake of dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin, causing a prolonged effect of these neurotransmitters. Chewing and sucking the leaves allow the cocaine to be absorbed slowly through the mucous membranes. This results in a slower onset of effects and much lower blood levels than are usually obtained via snorting, which is the most common route by which the drug is used recreationally. When people snort the drug, the intent is to get the very fine cocaine hydrochloride powder high into the nasal passages, right on the nasal mucus. From there, it is absorbed quite rapidly and, through circulatory mechanisms that are not completely understood, reaches the brain rather quickly. Cocaine molecules are metabolized by enzymes in the blood and liver, and the activity of these enzymes is variable from one person to another. So in any case, cocaine itself is rapidly removed with a half-life about 1 hour. The major metabolites, which are the basis of urine screening tests, have a longer half-life of about 8 hours, so it takes about 3 days for complete elimination of cocaine metabolites from the urine following moderate use of the drug. So, beneficial uses of cocaine. The local anesthetic properties of cocaine were discovered in 1860, soon after its isolation from coca leaves. It was not until 1884 that this characteristic was used medically. The early applications were in eye surgery and dentistry. Because cocaine is absorbed so well into mucous membranes, it remains in use for surgery in the nasal and the esophageal regions. Athletes, entertainers, politicians are only a few of the people who may use the drug in an effort to enhance social interactions and performance. Cocaine has not been uh, used medically for its CNS, central nervous system effects for many years, in part because the effects are brief, but mostly because of prohibition laws that ban recreational drugs, with the exception of things like alcohol, nicotine, and most currently marijuana. The acute toxicity is a cause for concern. There's no evidence that occasional use of small amounts of cocaine is a threat to the individual's health. Illicit cocaine, which is purchased from unsanctioned sources, can pose health risks for a variety of reasons, as it's usually adulterated or cut, is what they refer to it as, with other chemicals that are sometimes more dangerous than the cocaine itself. One of the main reasons for this practice is because illicit manufacturers and drug traffickers have discovered that they can save money and stretch their product by adding a cheaper agent to their cocaine batches. Extraordinarily large doses of cocaine can lead to profound CNS stimulation, progressing to convulsions, which can lead to respiratory or cardiac arrest. So it's important to remember that drug-related effects, either helpful or harmful, are largely dependent on the amount that's taken. Taking large doses of the drug repeatedly over the course of several days can cause severe appetite and sleep disruptions, leading to irritability, restlessness, and paranoia. In extreme instances, this can result in a full-blown paranoid psychosis in which the individual loses touch with reality and experiences hallucinations. Most individuals seem to recover from the psychosis as the drug leaves the system, so calming and comforting the distressed user would be extremely helpful. The majority of cocaine users do not and will not ever meet criteria for cocaine use disorder or addiction. Like most recreational drugs, cocaine can produce addiction in some users, and virtually every species of laboratory animal will readily self-administer the drug, as long as there aren't more attractive options, such as a sexually receptive mate. Some people experience problems related to their cocaine use and may require treatment to deal with such issues. When crack first appeared in late 1984, media reports claimed that the use of the drug was having especially devastating effects on pregnant women and their developing fetuses. This is where the term crack babies came from. Policies were passed that severely punished pregnant women who used cocaine, and considerable stigmas were associated with crack use. There may be real and immediate potential problems associated with such use. Cocaine is readily available on the illicit market in all major U.S. metropolitan areas, despite the fact that most of it originates in South America. Each year, about 1,000 tons of cocaine hydrochloride are produced in South America. Bolivia typically produces about half as much as cocoa as Peru, and Colombia twice as much as Peru. Large shipments of cocaine were traditionally routed by boat or plane to any hundreds of islands in the Caribbean, and from there to Miami or other ports in the eastern United States, again by small boat or airplane. Although sea routes continue to be important, the pressure brought by Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard, uh, these efforts have shifted trafficking somewhat more to land routes through Central America and Mexico. Throughout the 1980s, the National Survey on Drug Use and Health found that 7 to 9% of young adults reported use of cocaine within the past month. Data from the Monitoring the Future study showed that cocaine use decreased substantially among high school seniors between 1985 and 1994. Although the number reporting use increased somewhat during the mid 1990s, less than 3% now report use in the past year, compared to 12% at the peak of cocaine use, which was in the early 80s. So let's move on to amphetamines. For centuries, the Chinese have made a medicinal tea from herbs that they call mahuang, which American scientists classify as ephedra. The active ingredient in these herbs is called ephedrine, and it's used to dilate the bronchial passages in asthma patients. Bronchial dilation can be achieved by stimulating the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system, or ANS, and that is exactly what ephedrine does. It's referred to as a sympathomimetic drug. In the late 1920s, researchers synthesized and studied the effects of a new chemical that was similar in structure to ephedrine. Amphetamine was patented in 1932. Amphetamine's first use was a replacement for ephedrine in the treatment of asthma. The wake-promoting effect of amphetamine led to testing it for the treatment of narcolepsy in 1935. In 1939, amphetamine went to war. There were many reports that Germany was using amphetamines to increase the efficiency of its soldiers. And by the 1960s, amphetamines had become so widely available at such a low price that more IV drug users were using them, either in combination with heroin or alone. Although they were prescription drugs, it was not difficult for people of means to obtain a prescription to treat depression or obesity. Although the speed scene of the late 1960s was relatively short lived and only a small number of people were directly involved, it was the focus of a great deal of national concern. And it helped change the way the medical professional and society at large viewed these drugs, which has been so widely accepted. One reaction to limited amphetamine availability was an increase in the number of illicit laboratories making methamphetamine, which acquired the name crank. The process for making meth has been on the street since the 1960s, and illicit laboratories have been raided every year. By the late 1990s, however, the number of illicit meth laboratories confiscated by the authorities increased dramatically. One reason that the number of laboratories has increased is said to be related to the relative ease by which meth can be produced. Performing a successful synthesis resulting in pure methamphetamine is a much more difficult task than what is portrayed in the popular media. In the early 2000s, a wave of stories appeared attesting to the destructive effects associated with meth use. Finding from a critical review of the scientific literature evaluating the long-term effects of methamphetamine in humans indicated that meth users' cognitive functioning and their brain structures were generally normal. The chemical structure of basic amphetamine is similar to the catecholamine neurotransmitters. It appears that amphetamine produces its effect because it's recognized as one of these catecholamines. at many sites in both the central and the peripheral nervous system. Like cocaine, amphetamines increase the activity of the neurotransmitters such as dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin. Although amphetamines accomplish this effect via a different mechanism, amphetamines augment the activity of these neurotransmitters by stimulating release rather than by inhibiting the reuptake. Like cocaine, amphetamines are consumed through a variety of routes, including oral, intranasal, and intravenous, and smoked. When taken orally, peak effects occur between 60 and 90 minutes after ingestion, which is the half-life of amphetamines, which ranges from 5 to 12 hours, with high doses, which is of rapid tolerance, may be seen. During the 1950s and early 1960s, amphetamines were the treatment of choice for depression and fatigue. As amphetamines became more stigmatized in the late 1960s, and as the modern class of antidepressants were developed, they were used less frequently as first-line depression treatment medications. Amphetamines are still used today as an adjunctive therapy to treat depression. Probably the most common medical use for amphetamines through the 1960s was for weight control. Even though only limited data shows the effectiveness of amphetamines for this purpose, it's clear that amphetamines reduce appetite and food intake for short periods of time, such as a few weeks. What's less clear, however, is the impact of amphetamines on long-term weight loss. Narcolepsy is a sleep disorder in which individuals do not sleep normally at night, and in the daytime they experience uncontrollable episodes of muscular weakness and falling asleep. The best available treatment seems to be to keep the patient awake during the day with amphetamines or other stimulants, such as Provigil. Today, the most common use of amphetamines is for treating symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. This class of drug has been shown to reduce activity levels and improve concentration in hyperactive children and adults. It is still not understood why the drugs are or what the drugs are doing to reduce hyperactivity, and there's still no solution to the apparent paradox, which is why does a stimulant drug appear to be producing a calming effect? Data from twin studies indicate that genetic factors contribute substantially to the expression of ADHD. Findings from other studies suggest that the disorder is associated with prefrontal cortex deficits. The evidence demonstrating the beneficial effects of amphetamines and such as Ritalin in the treatment of ADHD bolsters that latter theory. One concern is that treatment with stimulant medications will lead to substance abuse, even though findings from controlled studies show stimulant therapy is protective against substance abuse. One of the more disturbing side effects of stimulant therapy is a suppression of height and weight increases during drug treatment. There's been a lot of research done on the role of stimulants for improving mental performance. One area of interest is performance that has been disrupted by fatigue and or sleep deprivation. The effects of amphetamines on performance of healthy individuals depend on the type of task and dose. Simple performance might be improved, but complex performance is likely to be disrupted at larger doses. Under some conditions, the use of amphetamines or other stimulants at an appropriate dose can produce slight improvements in athletic performance. During the period of amphetamine intoxication with above normal doses, the altered behavior patterns or acute behavioral toxicity can cause some dangers. At higher doses, especially administered for extended periods of time, the user can become suspicious to the point of paranoia. The development of a paranoid psychosis has long been known to be one of the effects of sustained amphetamine use. In some cases in which paranoid psychosis have been produced by amphetamines, the paranoid thinking and loss of touch with reality have been slow to return to normal. persisting for days or even weeks after the drug has left the system. There is no good evidence for permanent behavioral or personality disruption. To circumvent legal restrictions placed on so-called classic drugs, illicit manufacturers synthesize and sell novel psychoactive substances as alternatives. In recent years, there's been a proliferation of these drugs, especially the cathinones. Structurally similar to amphetamine, cathinone is the main psychoactive component found in the East African shrub khat, Khat. In the United States, these drugs are sometimes referred to as bath salts because they were once disguised and sold as such in order to get around prohibitory drug laws. And that takes us to the end of our stimulant chapter here. Uh, so I hope you have learned a little bit more about stimulants, and check in soon to my channel and I will post more on drugs.